Hello, welcome back to my 2024 Reading Wrapped, where I've read about 50 books this year and I'm going to be going through them all and giving my thoughts. I'll just be giving my thoughts, so I won't be reviewing them, but if you would like a big in-depth review video, then I'll be happy to make one if you comment down below of what book you would want it. But I am going to be rating the books in accordance to my thoughts. So I'll be rating them out of 5 stars. So that's why 3 stars may seem low, but it's actually not compared to the other ones, the other books. And there's no spoilers in this video, so if you haven't read a book, you can feel free to listen to my thoughts that are spoiler free. So let's get started. The first book I read this year is the Natural series. It's a really great mystery if you like character building and mysteries in one. It's like a found family type trope, and I highly recommend it if you like mystery. If you read Inheritance Games, which is also by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, which was also pretty good. And yeah, I did like this series better than Inheritance Games if you've read it and you have something to compare to. Yeah. So there's 4 books of the series. Actually, there's 5. One is a short novella, which I really liked. The first book I rated 4 stars. The second book I'll rate it 5 stars. The third book 4 stars, and the fourth book 4 stars. And the novella, I'll give it 5 stars because it really wrapped up the series nicely, and I highly recommend this if you like mystery. And speaking of Jennifer Lynn Barnes, Inheritance Games had this new book, novella, I guess, or actually I think it's a trilogy. This is the first book, The Brothers Hawthorne, and I loved it. It was pretty good, but I gave it 3.5 stars, but that might be because I don't remember what happened much in Inheritance Games, so it might have been lower because of that, but it was still really good. Moving on, we have Once Upon a Broken Heart. So last year I read Caraval, and so I loved Caraval. It was really good. So going into this series, I had high expectations because of how much I liked Caraval, and it didn't disappoint. However, I did like Caraval better. On the internet, I've seen most people liked Once Upon a Broken Heart better than Caraval, but I disagree. I like that better, although this one is still a really good fantasy, and I did like it. Also, if you're wondering if you should read Caraval first, like I was when I started reading it, I would definitely recommend it because you can read this on its own. You don't have to read Caraval, but I would recommend it because one, it's a good series. Also, one of the main characters of this has a backstory in Caraval, and I think it's really important if you read it, so you should. Oh, also, I forgot to rate it. I rated the first book 3.5 stars. It started off alright. Second book, 4 stars, though the ending was alright, if you know what I mean. And the third book I'd rate it 4 stars. So yeah, it got better as it went on, and it ended off great. Okay, next series, another one that I've seen a lot on the internet, Powerless. So this is a bit controversial in my opinion, but at the same time not controversial at all. So I did really like it. I rated it, the first one, 4 stars because it was a really good series. However, I have some things that I would like to point out that I've seen not a lot of people point out. So there's some downsides to the series, and it's very overhyped. First of all, it's a complete copy of Red Queen. If you read both of their summaries, there won't be any difference. And it is just Red Queen and Hunger Games combined, as someone who's read all 3 books now. And what I hate about it is that it's actually the people who've read this book, because Red Queen, which came out in 2015, and Powerless, which came out in 2023, keep that in mind. So I went on a Red Queen video and I saw all the comments were talking about how Powerless had stolen Red Queen's idea, that Red Queen had stolen Powerless's idea, which is completely false because Red Queen came out before. And I didn't like how Red Queen was getting unnecessary hate by people who didn't know that Powerless had actually stolen the plot of Red Queen. So yeah, I didn't like that. Also, it's very unoriginal, not because it also just copied Red Queen, but because it took all of the popular book talk themes that was online, combined them all in one book, and mushed them all together so that it was kind of overcrowded and had too much in it. So I didn't really like that part that much, but it was still a really good book. The banter was really good. The characters were good. But yeah, it's very unoriginal. Same thing goes for the other two. However, the other two are more original. Like this one, I expected to not like it, but I actually really liked it. So I rated it 4.5 stars. And it gave Adena a really good backstory, which, yeah, I'm not going to spoil, but it made it even more sad. And then Reckless, it has no plot, so I gave it 3.5 stars. It's not really much of a fantasy book, just more romance, I guess, but yeah, it had no plot. This whole series doesn't have much of a plot. It does, but not that much. So, moving on from that, I read this book. I hope this doesn't find you, and I gave it 4.5 stars surprisingly. I kind of liked this, and usually I don't ever read romance books, but this year I read a couple of them, and all the ones that I read this year are a bit different. The trope is academic rivals to lovers, which I found out that I kind of like, and I kind of just read it because it was trending. I kept on seeing it everywhere, but I didn't expect to like it, which I did. Though going back, I think I'm going to change the 4.5 stars to 4.2, but it's still up there. It's still a really good book. So switching up genres now, I read Animal Farm. So Animal Farm, it's pretty good. 3 stars. I mean, 3 stars for a classic because it's actually pretty good, yeah. I liked 1984 better though, so that's why I gave it 3 stars. But yeah, nothing much to say. Speaking of 1984, I gave this 3.7 stars, which is pretty good for a classic book. And I do like dystopian books. It did remind me of Brave New World, which I read last year, which I did not like, but I didn't like it because I read it for school, so that might have influenced my opinion. But yeah, pretty good book. Next is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I reread this book. I read it in 2022 or 2021, I forgot. But yeah, it's pretty good as always, 5 stars. And I reread it so that I could watch the show, but I ended up not watching the show yet. I will, but I just heard a lot of controversial opinions about it. Like I heard that they focused more on the romance part of it than the mystery part, which I didn't like the sound of. And I've also heard they took out a main character, which is really important to the second book. So yeah, I don't know how they're gonna make the second series, but yeah. I also meant to read the second and third book, but I'm going to read it in 2025. I just never got around to it in 2024. But yeah, I'll read it once it comes in the library, which it's taken a while. Speaking of Holly Jackson, who made Good Girls Guide to Murder, I also read 2 other books of hers. One is Five Survive, which is pretty good. I gave it 3.7 stars, and I love the action, the thriller book. I read it as an audiobook, which I'm glad I read it as an audio, because if you're into horror, it's a great choice to do it, because when you're listening to it, especially at night, you can it feels like you're actually in the book and feeling the experience, because you can hear like the leaves rustling or gunshots in the background or things like that, and you can really feel the thriller part of the book. So it was pretty good. And in general, alright, 3.7 stars. Reappearance of Rachel Price, another Holly Jackson book. I liked it better than Five Survive. Not sure about Good Girls Guide to Murder. Maybe even better than that, but I'm gonna give it 4.7 stars. Let me explain. So, in the beginning, it was really boring. I started off thinking it was a straight 3 stars. It was kind of slow. However, when it went to the end, it was so good. As soon as it reached the end, the plot twist started coming one by one, and you would never guess it. It was like, it's pretty good. So, it automatically skyrocketed to a 5-star book. However, since it was boring in the beginning, I gave it 4.7 stars. But it's really good. It was very shocking, the plot twist. It was like twist after twist after twist. And yeah, it had great themes also. And overall, I highly recommend it. It's a great mystery if you're willing to sit through the beginning and be patient. Okay, next, Hurricane Wars. So I knew nothing about this going into it. I'd never heard it. I just randomly picked it up because the cover looked kind of pretty. But 4 stars. It's actually pretty good. It's an enemies to lovers, and I like the way the author wrote it. Thea, yeah, Thea. I like the way she wrote it, and it was one of the best enemies to lovers, I think, that I've read this year. Actually, not that good, but it was pretty good. Like, it had a direct enemies to lovers, unlike Powerless, and they weren't like toxic enemies to lovers, unlike Cruel Prince, where Cardan basically bullied her the entire time. But it was pretty good. They were like on two opposite sides of a war, and the series hasn't come out. This is the first book, but I will be reading it when it does come out. Okay, next, The Giver. Another, I think classic? Not sure. It's like an Anne of Green Gables type classic, if you know what I mean by that. I give it 4 stars. It's a light and comfy read. Read it in like barely any time. It's very short, and I would recommend it. And overall nice. However, I heard it has a series, but I won't be reading the series, not because it was bad, but because I like the ending of this and I want to leave it as that. I don't want to continue reading for the series. And then next comes Divine Rivals. I mainly just picked this up because I saw it online. It kept on coming on my YouTube and Instagram feed, and it is still good. I gave the first book, I think, 4.5 stars initially, but over time I think it kind of got lower, but it was still really good. It's basically about like 2 characters sending letters to each other, and they didn't know who they were sending letters to, but I mean, eventually they found out, and it's a fantasy book, so the whole fantasy stuff happened, and it's pretty good. And the second book, but okay, the first book was pretty good. The second book, I gave it 3.3 stars. It was not that good. It was kind of slow. I don't know, as far as I remember, but it was still really good. I recommend the series in general, but I like the first book better. Okay, today, tonight, tomorrow. I love this book. It was a romance book, but it was it was rivals to lovers, so academic rivals, and I gave it 4.7 stars, really high. It was pretty good, and it was a cute, cozy read, and one of the best romance books I've read, though I haven't read many, so yeah. Basically, it's about how these 2 people in high school, a girl and a guy, were competing entire high school for valedictorian, and they hated each other but kind of secretly admired how each other were like smart, yeah. And then in the last few days of high school, their school had like a scavenger hunt, so they teamed up because together they're kind of unstoppable, and obviously they won. And throughout the scavenger hunt and book, they found out, well, they liked each other, and yeah. And there's actually a second book to this, Past, Present, Future, where sometime later this book came out, and they were in college, and it was alright. It was 3 stars. I didn't like it as much as the first book, because the first book set the standards high, but it was still really good. I'm definitely going to reread both of these books later. Both of these books later on. Maybe when I've graduated high school, because I feel like that's a good time to read it. So like in a 1 year. Daughter of the Pirate King. I don't know how to feel about this series. Starting off, it was not a good series for me. I didn't like it. It was slow and I just didn't like it. I gave it 3.2 stars, the first book. But it might have been because I read it as an audio or listened to it as an audiobook, and I didn't like the voice that narrated it, but that's not really the series' fault, so I'm taking that out, but it might have influenced my decision a bit. But it grew on me at the end. Like the first one I gave like 3.2 stars, the second one I gave 3.5 stars, and then the third one 4 stars. So it definitely grew on me. And yeah, I liked the characters as the series went on. And the third book was my favorite because it was not about the main character, but about like a side character, and I really like the side character. So yeah. Next series is The Queen's Thief. Yeah, the series is pretty good. I liked it. I didn't finish reading it. I think there's 2 or 3 other books to it, but I've only read the first 4 books. But I'm going to finish it, and I like the character. I like Jen. The first book was kind of slow at first, but over time it got better, and I like the other ones. The first book was 3 stars and the rest were 3.5 stars. But overall, it was a pretty good book. Okay, the next thing, Legendborn and Bloodmarked. I really love the series. I gave it 5 stars because, okay, I went into it thinking it was not going to be that good. I didn't know anything about it, but at the end it was pretty good. And it's one of the best books this year that I've read, along with Naturals, I think. It's basically based on King Arthur and her and his legends, and it's basically how the main character is like the descendant of King Arthur or something. I guess that's kind of a spoiler, but it's pretty obvious, and it's pretty good. I recommend it, and I guess there's like a love triangle in this, but I usually hate love triangles, but in this case, I really liked it because it felt like they were all like best friends, and I don't know how to explain it if you haven't read it, but if once you read it, you'll know what I mean. It's pretty good. I also gave the second book 5 stars, which is rare to give both books 5 stars in the same series, but I highly recommend it. You should read it. And the third book hasn't come out yet, but I will read it as soon as it does. I read it in like very less time. Okay, next book, The Stolen Hair. Don't know why I read this. I gave it 3 stars. It's like a novella from the Cruel Prince series, and I think it's a series actually, the Stolen Hair series. I didn't read the other book, but I might read it. I'm not sure. It's alright. Not that good. Okay, last romance book of the year is Check and Mate. It's again kind of academic rivals to lovers, kind of. It's as you can see by the title, it's about basically this girl who she's good at chess, but she doesn't play competitively. But she got forced into doing some chess competition, and somehow this guy who is like the best chess champion or whatever of their world, he was somehow at this event. I don't know why, but I'm not going to question it. And obviously, naturally, she beats the best chess champion or whatever. She gets roped into doing chess competitions, and she becomes like some grandmaster, some really good chess person. I don't know. Kind of reminded me of Queen's Gambit, and overall it was pretty good. I gave it 4.5 stars since I read it all in a day. Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. I did not like this book. I read this book because apparently it's like in the top 10 or something of the entire century. I don't know how it got there. It should not be there. But it's basically about these two friends who have this backstory, and they make a game together, and it was successful, and it was pretty good actually, except the thing about this book is that it was so long that it just never ended. It was never ending, even though it wasn't that long. Like, it was 400 pages maybe, but it felt like a 1,000-page book. It just never ended. Also, I didn't like the relationship between Sadie and Dov because it was so toxic. I hated it. I don't know why the author wrote about it that much, and it made the whole book bad. 2 bad books in a row. A Fate Inked in Blood. I hated this book. I actually didn't finish this book. I DNF'd it, and this is one of the only books that I've ever DNF'd. I think I've only really stopped reading purposefully one other book. And it's the worst book I've read in 2024, but I'm not gonna rate it because I didn't finish the book, and I just didn't like it. It was boring, cringy, slow, and just not good. Moving on a better note, very better note, Red Rising series. I love the series. 4 stars, but like a very high 4 stars for the first book, and probably for all of the books, and it was really good. Sci-fi, fantasy, dystopian. Highly recommend it. I'm actually in the middle of reading the 3rd book. I'm not done yet, but I'm almost done, so I'm counting it as 2024, and it's really good. I basically started reading it because I saw this video that this guy on YouTube made, and it seems like he always makes videos about this series. Don't know what his name is though, but it's pretty good. And yeah, you should read it. Recommend it. It gives like a found family vibe. Yeah. Next is, okay, Keeper of Lost Cities. I only reread the first 4 books, not the last 4. I couldn't find a picture with just the first 4. Okay, so I reread the series for like the 20th time. I used to love it when I was little, and yeah, let me talk about this a bit. I started this series when I was in 3rd grade, and right now it looks like I'm going to be finishing it when I'm a sophomore in college. There's a lot more books than this. There's just a picture I found. So I really loved the first 5 books. Like, it's crazy because I started the series when I was reading the first 5. I like the first 6 books actually, up until Nightfall. After that, it kind of just got bad. I think, okay, I think what happened to the series is that it was really good in the beginning, and it's still really good. I reread it, and it's still good, and I should say that it should have stopped at the 6th book, but I can't say that because there were too many plot holes to stop there, and the thing is, there's still too many plot holes. The author, Shannon Messenger, is great. She's written these books really well. It's just that she keeps on opening up new plots and giving new plot holes and not resolving the previous ones. So there's still plot holes open from like the first few books that still haven't been resolved. And I think she should resolve it because what she's doing right now is she's taking those plot holes, building more things around it, and adding new plots and new plot holes to the series. And it's just extending it out too much. And it's dragging along so much that I've gotten bored now. But I will still be reading the other books. It's just that I only consider the first 6 books to be in the series that I like now. And I'll only be rereading those books. But I will be finishing the books just for nostalgic sake. Next is my first Agatha Christie book that I read, Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Oh, also I didn't rate these. I'll give them all 4 stars, the first 4 that I've read. Yeah, so Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and I read it. I liked it, 3.5 stars. The reason why it's 3.5 is because I guessed the plot twist from the beginning, and I thought it was a kind of obvious plot twist, but yeah. But it was pretty good, and I'll be reading more books from Agatha Christie, great mystery author. And finally, Heartstopper. I only read this because I love watching Unclaimed Demigod on YouTube for Percy Jackson, and she likes the series, so I decided to read it, and it's a light read. I guess this is also a romance series, but it's not my vibe. I didn't like it that much. I gave it 3.2 stars, but it's pretty good still. It's a graphic novel, so it took me like less than a day to read all 5 of them. So yeah, but it's not really my type, but I can see how people like it. And yeah, that's it. I also read Killers of the Flower Moon for school, but I won't rate it because it's a school book, so annotating it kind of made it worse, and writing essays. Yeah. Anyways, before I wrap up this video and 2024 reading, let me talk about the books I'll be reading in January 2025 or the beginning of 2025. And first of all, it'll be The Wrath of Triple Goddesses. I already started it. It's really good. The new Percy Jackson book that came out in September. And it's pretty good. I'll also be reading the other one in September that comes out. I'll also be reading Dance of Thieves and what's it called? Whoa, Thieves. Yeah, I'll definitely be reading this. Yeah, I like the covers, that's why I got it. But yeah, till then, bye. This was my 2024 reading recapped.